Hello everyone. Previously we saw how to build a simple interest calculator. So today we'll continue with building the expense tracker, right? So I'll just come here. Let me right click, hover on new and click on Java class. I'll just give the name. Just give me a second. Just give the name expense tracker. So what we have done here, we have added the main class to interact with the expense manager, right? Basically this one. So let me start from beginning. So initially what I'll do, just give me a second. So initially what I'll do, I'll just come here and import the necessary classes for file input and output operation. I'll just give import java.io. Done. Also, let's import the necessary classes for date and collection operations as well. Here, in my case, I'll just give import java.util. Basically, we have imported the necessary class for file input and output operations as well. And we have imported the necessary classes for the date and collection operations that we'll be using in the code. For now, just follow along with me, right? Let's write a class representing an expense. For that one, I'll just give class expense implements serializable, right? So what we have done here, we are implementing the serializable to allow the object serialization initially. So I'll just make use of private static final long. I'll just give serial version UID. I'm just setting this one to 1L. So this is nothing but the unique identifier for the serialization. Just follow along with me. You'll get to know what we have done here, right? So I'll just give private string description. Let's make use of description, amount, category as well as date. So just give private. Let me make use of double amount private. This one for the category, I'll just make use of the string. I'll give category. Finally, just for the date, I'll just make use of the date. Here, let me give date. So next, let's create the constructor to initialize an expense. How to do that? Let me comment this one and write constructor to initialize. Initialize an expense. How will we do that? Let me make use of public expense. Here, let me copy the same thing here from this one, right? So just give me a second. Let me copy this one. String description. This one basically double amount string category. So just give comma here. The final one will be date, right? Let me copy this one as well. Let me paste it over here. So within this one, let me give this dot description equals, we are setting this one to description. Next, let's do the same thing for the amount category as well as date. I'll just copy the same thing here. Let me paste, what happened here? Let me close this one. So yeah, let me paste this one 3 more times. Instead of the description here, let me give amount. Here also, let's make this one amount. Same thing here. Let me give category here. Also, let me give category. The last one will be date. Let me change this one to date as 12. So this is it. After this one, let's create the getter methods for expense attribute. So how will do that one? Let's write this one completely public. So let me comment this one just for the reference. It will be easy to understand, right? Getter methods for expense attributes. So I'll just come here. Let me give public string to get description. So I should have chosen that one itself, right? So within this one, let's return the description. Here, return description. Just give me a second. So let it be here. So after this one, I'll just give public double. So this time get amount, right? So let's do this fast. Let me give. Let's return the amount. I'll just give amount. Next, let me give public. We have made use of string category. Get category. So here, let's return the category. Finally, let me give date. Sorry, here this has to be get date. Let's return the date. So yeah, this is easy. Next, what shall we do? Let's override the toString method to print the expense details. We have to print the expense details, right? For that one, let's make use of the annotation override toString, right? I'll just make use of annotation override. Let me give public string toString. So yeah, this is right. Then here, let me give a return within the string. I'll just give expense. Let me open this thing. Braces, rectangular braces. I'll just give description here. Let's concatenate the description. Here, let me give amount. Let's concatenate the amount. Okay, there. We come here. Let me give category. So did I do anything wrong here? Category. Let's concatenate the category as well, right? So yeah. After this one, let me give date. Let me make this one capital D. Let's concatenate date as well. This is it. This looks good, right? So after this, let's write a class to manage expenses. Let me comment this one and write class to expense, manage expenses, right? So let me make use of class. Let me give the name expense manager. So inside this one, let's create a list to store the expenses. For that one, I'll just make use of private list. Within the list, let me give expenses. This is nothing but we have created a list to store the expenses. Next, let's create the constructor to initialize the expense manager. How can we do that? Let me give public expense manager expenses equals, let's initialize the expenses list. So for this one, I'll just give new array list. Next, let's load the expenses from the file. For that one, I'll just give load expenses. Just give me a second. So load expenses method, we have not written this one yet. We'll be writing this one in the future. Just follow along with me. You'll get to know what we have written here, basically. Load expenses, right? So next, let's write the method to add an expense. So for that one, let me comment this one and write method to add an expense. For that one, I'll just give public void add expense. Here, I'll just give expense right? So here, let's add the expenses to the list. I'll just give expenses. How can we add? I'll just give expense. So we have added the expenses to the list. Next, we have to save the expenses to the file as well, right? For that one, we'll be creating the save expenses in the future. But for now, I'll just give the name. Just follow along with me. I'll just give save expenses. This is the method. We have not written this method yet. We'll be writing that one in the future. So just follow along with me. Next here, let's write a method to view all the expenses. To view all expenses. And just come here. Let me give public list. I'll just give expense view expenses. So within the view expenses, what we are gonna do, we'll just return a copy of the expenses list. How can we do that? I'll just give return new array list of, here I'll just give expenses. So we are returning a copy of the expense list, right? This is fine. So next, let's write a method to get the expenses by category. I'll just comment this one and write method to get expenses by category. So let me come here. Let me give public list expense. Here, get expense by category, right? Here, let's give category. The data type will be string, right? Category. So here, next step, what we'll do, let's create the list to store the expenses by category. For that one, I'll just give list. Let me give. So what happened here? Anything wrong? So this has to be capital E, right? Sorry. Expense. Let me give variable name result, new array list. So we have created the list to store the expenses by category. Next, let's iterate through the expenses. For that, I'll just make use of the for loop. For loop, this one will be expense and expense of expenses. We are iterating through the expenses. Next, let's make use of the if condition. If expense get category equals ignore case of category. So we are checking the category, right? Basically here in this line. So next, let's add the expense to the result list. How can we do that? Let me select not the return basically. Sorry, it will be result dot add of expense. So this one we are again I'm telling in this line we are adding the expense to the result list. Finally, what we'll do, we'll return the result. Let me come here. Let me give return result. So this is fine. After this, let's write a method to get the total expenses, right? So I'll just come here. Let me comment this one and write. Sorry. Method to get total expenses. For this one, I'll just give public double. Sorry. That one use space. Get total expenses. We can here inside the get total expenses. Let's initialize a variable to store the total amount. How can we do that? Let me give double, make use of the variable total name and initialize this one to 0. Next, let's iterate through the expenses. For that one, I'll be making use of for loop. I'll just give expense here of expenses, right? Next, let's add the amount to the total. How can we do that? Total, sorry, this one just total equals total plus expense dot get amount. What we have done here, we have already added the amount to the total. Next, let's finally return the total. How we can do that? I'll just come here. Let's give return total. This is it. Next, let's implement the method to save the expenses to a file. Let me comment this one and write for the reference. Method to save expenses to a file. So how can we do that? I'll just come here, private void save expenses. What I'll do, I'll just give try object output stream. Just give me a second. I'll just make use of object output stream. So here are wrong braces, right? So I'll just give the braces correctly. I'll just make use of OOL equals new object output string. Within this new file output stream, within the file output stream, let's add the file name. Let's give I'll just give expenses.tat. So until here, this is fine. Let's give start a write object, right? We're making use of write object of expenses. This is fine. What we are doing here, basically this line, we are just writing the expenses list to the file. This is easy, right? Next, let me make use of the catch block. I'll just give IO input output exception. Let me give E. Here inside this one, let's print by making use of sout. In my case, I'll just give error saving expenses. So, sorry, this one. Let's concatenate the get message. So this is fine. We are just handling the exceptions here. So here, let me make this capital T so that this looks good. Did I do anything here? What is here? Private method number. So here, yeah, we have to make this capital E, right? Sorry. Now this looks fine. So what is this here? Let me check once. Do anything wrong? Anywhere? It's fine. So yeah, here caps, right? This is fine. Yeah, this is fine. Save the expenses of the file, right? Next, let's implement a method to load the expenses from a file. I'll just comment here and write method to load the expenses from a file. Let me give private void load expenses. So this time, the same thing, I'll just copy this line. Let me copy this line until here. Let me paste the same thing over here. So here, I'll give expenses equals list of expense, right? Yep, expense. So I'll just give OIS. We are reading the object, right? So I'll just give read object. So here what it is showing, cannot resolve symbol. Yes. For now, let it be. So what we are doing here is, we are reading the expenses list from the file basically. So expense OS dot read offset. This is fine. Next, let's make use of the catch block. Here, let's give file not found exception. This one is file once. Then let's print a message saying no existing expense data found. This is one thing. Let me give starting new. You can give anything. I just give the relevant thing to the project, right? So we are just handling the file not found here. This is fine. Let me make use of the catch block again. In this case, let's give input output exception or class not found exception. This one, E. In my case, let me give sout and print error. Let me make this one capital E. Error loading expenses concatenate the get message. So here what we are doing here, we are handling the other exceptions as well. So this is it. Next, let's come to the main class. Nothing but the expense tracker. This one, right? So here, next step, let's create the instance of the expense manager. For that one, I'll just give private that expense manager. And let me give a manager. New expense manager. This is fine. What we have done here, we have created an instance of the expense manager. Next, what we are gonna do, let's create the method to display the menu options. We have to have some menu options, right? In this case, we are having add expense, view expenses by the category, view total expenses. These 4 things along with the heading, expense tracker, and finally along with the exit and enter your choice, right? These things. So here I'll just comment this one and write method to display menu options. So how we can do this? Let me give private static void. In my case, I'll just give display name. Let me make use of sout. Let me give expense tracker. So we are printing the menu header, right? Initially, I'll just copy the entire line. Let me paste 6 more times just below this one. This is fine. Instead of the expense tracker, I'll just give add expense. This looks fine, right? Here, in my case, I'll just delete this one as well. Here, let me give view expenses. We are printing the menu options 1 to 5 basically. So in this case, let me delete this one. Let me give the view expenses by category. This is third one. For the fourth one, I'll just come here. Let me delete this one. Fourth one will be view total expenses. This has to be expenses, right? The fifth one will be, let me delete this one first. Sorry. Let me delete this one first. Fifth one will be exit. Finally, here for this one, let's give enter your choice. This is fine. After this, let's define the main method to run the program. In this case, public static void main string args. This is fine, right? So let's create the scanner object for the user input. This is easy. Let's give scanner new scanner of, I'll just make use of system dot. So what we have done here, we have created a scanner object for the user in. Next, let's create an infinite loop to create the, to keep the program running. So in my case, I'll just make use of while loop. Let me give while. If it is true, then let me give display menu. So we have displayed the menu here. Next, let's read the user choice. I'll just give the variable name choice here. Scanner next end. After this, let's consume the new line character. Let me give scanner next line. This is fine. So until here, everything looks fine. What happened to this one? Cannot resolve the method display menu in the expected date method. So we already have the method, this one, right? So basically display menu. This has to be, so yeah, here instead of display menu, I have done display name. Sorry, yeah. Now this looks good. Yeah, this is correct, right? Next, let's make use of the switch case to handle the user choices finally. So I'll just come here. Let me give switch choice. Let me give case 1. This one, let's add the new expense in this case, right? Enter a new expense. If the user has selected this one, the first one, add expense. So let's add the new expense, right? In my case, I'll just give yes out. What shall we print? Initially, I'll just give enter description. This is one thing, and I'll just make use of the variable name description scanner. Next line, we are reading the expense description. Next, let's read the expense amount as well, right? Or let's, before that, let me make use of s out, enter amount in this case. So next, let's read the expense amount as well. In my case, I'll just make use of double. Let me give the variable name amount. Scanner. We have made use of the double, right? So I'll just give next double. Nothing but we are reading the expense amount. Next, let's consume the new line character. For that one, I'll just make use of scanner. Next line. After consuming the new line character, let's print the enter category, right? In this case. So after this, let's read the expense category. In my case, I'll just give string category. This one I have to type entirely. This is not showing the suggestions, right? Category scanner. Let me give scanner dot next line. So this is one thing, nothing but in this line, we are reading the expense category. Next, let's get the current date. For getting the current date, I'll just give date equals new date. So this has to be function, right? Sorry. New date, this has to be capital D. Now this is fine. Next, what shall we do? Let's create the expense object. How can we create the expense object? Let me give expense simple. Give new expense of let's give description, amount, category, and this one date. Description, amount, category. Finally, this is completely fine. What we have done here, we have created the expense object. After this one, let's add the expense to manager. I'll just come here. Let me give manager dot add expense of expense. We are adding the we have added the expense to the manager. Finally, let's print the confirmation message. In my case, I'll just give expense added successfully. Let's make use of the S out, right? And let's print the message. Let me give this capital E, expense added successfully. So this is completely fine. Until here, fine. Let's break. Let's give break, right? So this looks good. Next, let's come to case 2, right? So what happened here? Let me give case 2. So case 2, let's view all the expenses. If the user selects this one, right? View the view expenses. So for that one, let's write the case. In my case, I'll just give viewing all expenses. This is just for the reference. So initially what I'll do, print the message saying listing all expenses. So we have to list all the expenses, right? So for that one, I'll just make use of list here. Within this, this has to be capital expense. Yes, let me make use of the expenses manager view expenses. So what we are doing here in this line, we are getting all the expenses. That's what we have to get a list of all the expenses, and we have to, basically we are viewing all the expenses, right? When we choose the second option. That's what we are doing here. Next, let's make use of the if condition. If expenses dot is empty, if it is empty, then what do? Let's print by making use of s out. In my case, I'll just print no expenses recorded or found. You can give anything. In my case, I'll just give no expenses recorded. So if you don't have any expenses in the record, so then I'm just printing the message saying no expenses recorded. Else, what we'll do, I'll just make use of for loop. Let me give expense exp of expenses. We are just iterate expenses, right? Let's make use of s out. In my case, I'll just give ex. So this is fine. Finally, let me give break. So after this one, what shall I do? Just give me a second. Let's continue with case 3. So this is it. So case 3, what we are doing? Let me see once. Just give me a second. View expenses by the category. Based on the category, we'll be using the, we'll be viewing the expenses, right? So just give me a second. And just keep here viewing the expenses by category. So in my case, initially what I'll do, I'll just, by making use of s out, I'll just give enter category. This is fine. Next, let's read the category. How can we do that? I'll just give category scanner. Next line. This is it. We are what we are doing here, we are reading the category. Next, let me make use of s out. After this one, let's print listing expenses for category. So this is fine. Let's concatenate the category as well, right? Let me give expenses manager get expense by category. This one, get expense by category of category. This is simple. So what we have done here is we have got the expenses by category. So next, let me make use of the if condition. If expenses, this one is empty. Basically, if expenses is empty, then let's print a message and just make use of s out. What shall we print? In my case, I'll just give no expenses found for this category. This looks fine. What happened here? I misprint this. Fine. This is fine. If the expenses is not found, basically we are printing a message, no expenses found for this category. This is fine, right? So no need of space over here. Else, let's make use of the for list to display the expenses based on the category, right? In my case, I'll just give for expenses. So we are iterating through the expenses here. Let me make use of S out and give EX. This is completely fine. What we have done here, basically this line, we have iterated through the expenses, and finally in this line we are printing the expense details. Basically we have made use of the for loop, right? This is it. Next, let me give break here. Next, let's make use of the case 4. This is fine. Case, right? This is looks good. Case 4, what we are doing? Let me come here. Case 4, view the total expenses. So we have to view the total expenses, right? I'll just comment this one. View total expenses in my case. So here, let's give S out. Initially, let's print total expenses. Let me concatenate manager get total expenses. This is fine. So this is it. What we are doing here, we are printing the total expenses, right? This is fine basically. Let's give break. Next. So sorry, I'll just continue here itself. Sorry. Case 5. Case 5, what we are doing here, the 5th option, exit, right? Just give me a second. Why this is lagging? Here in my case, I'll just give exiting the program. So here, this is simple. I'll just give, sorry. Let me make use of S out. Let me give exiting. This looks good, right? So this is enough. Then let's close the scanner as well, right? After this one, I'll just give scanner.close in my case. So finally, let's exit the program. So I'll just call the return. Finally, we have to mention the default, right? So default case, what we are doing here. So if we choose the wrong option, right, there are only 5 options. If we give any other options, suppose if we have press 7, 8, 89, anything, any random number or anything other than the options, if we press, then we are displaying the this one, default message. What default message will print? Let me give S out of invalid choice. Please try again. So what we are doing here, we have printed a message saying invalid choice, please try again, right? I'll just make this one I, capital I, so that this looks good. Nothing else. So yeah, this is it. So basically, let me check once. So did I miss anything? Let me press Control Alt and I. So let me select this one. Let me press Control Alt and L, right? So that this formats the code correctly. Yeah, this looks fine. Did I do anything wrong? Let's check once. If I have done anything wrong, let's correct this one. Yeah, reassign local variable. This is fine. Reassigning a local variable is fine. This looks good, right? Let's run the code now. So one error this is showing. Cannot resolve symbol iOS. This is fine for now. Let's run the code. Let's wait for some time. So here what we are getting, symbol, variable, location, expense manager, variable, oh yes. This one, right? Let's check. So here I'll come, if I click here, so this has to be object input stream as well, right? So this has to be OIS. So here also I have copied from the basically here save expenses. I think this one first line. I forgot to change this one. So this has to be object input stream. Here also this has to be object input stream. Here also let's change this one to, instead of output, let me change this one to input stream, right? So read object, what this is saying, cannot resolve method, object output stream. So yeah, this has to be capital O, right? So yeah, this looks good. This is the only wrong thing. Let's run the code. Let's check. So yeah, now we can see expense tracker 1, add expense. We are getting the options, add expense, view expense by category, view total expenses, and exit, right? Let me choose the option 1. So it is asking me to enter the description. I'll just give trip. Yeah, trip to XYZ place. I'll just give, enter the amount. I'll just give, in my case, let me give 10,000. So enter category. I'll just give trip. So yeah, now we have added the expense, right? So next, let me select the view expenses. Let me add one more thing. Let me add one more expense. I'll just give 1. Let me give the description, birthday party. So enter amount, I'll just give 5,000. Enter category, I'll just give birthday. Yeah, this is fine. Next, let's view the expenses, right? I'll just give 2. Here, let me enlarge this one. Just give me a second. Yeah, you can see expenses description. This basically these 2 things I had already added. This one you can see here, trip to XYZ place, amount 10,000, category trip, and this one, right? So you're getting the date along with the time. So the same thing for the next one, birthday party, we are getting the amount, category as well, along with the date and time. So here we are this one 1 and 2 are working properly. Let me select 3 now, and so enter your choice. This has to be, why this is asking for the category? Oh, based on the category, we'll view the expenses, right? Here the category is for trip and the birthday. I'll just give birthday in this case, just to check. So yeah, you can see here, expense, description, birthday party, amount 5,000, category, birthday, date, and time we are getting here. This is working completely correct. 1, 2, 3. Finally, view total expenses. So I'll just give 4 now. So we are getting expense of 65,004 rupees. So this is correct, right? This one we have added 10,000 and 5,000. So basically this is correct. And 50,004, previously I had already added this one. So this is giving us 65,004 rupees. This is working fine. Finally, let's give 5 to exit. Showing exiting, and the process finished with exit code 0. This is it. Yeah, everything is working correctly. So this is it. Thanks for watching, guys.